Real Madrid just spent over €100 million on a 19-year-old who, 2 years ago, was playing in front of a few hundred people in Daytona Beach, Florida. Yan Diomande. And by the time you finish this video, you'll understand exactly why Madrid walked away from two proven elite-level attackers to go all in on a kid who was playing for Leganes reserve team 18 months ago. Let's start with the obvious question, because it's the one every Madrid fan is asking. Why not Olise? Why not Alvarez? On paper, both would have been the safer, more finished product. But football, especially at Real Madrid under Florentino Perez, isn't always about who's the best player right now. It's about who's actually available and at what cost, and Olise was never truly on the table this summer. Bayern Munich's sporting director Christoph Freund made that as clear as it gets, telling reporters that Olise's departure to Real Madrid is not a topic for discussion at all for Bayern. He's under contract until 2029, Bayern consider him untouchable, and while Perez is genuinely said to admire him and Madrid have quietly told Bayern they'll be ready to buy the moment he becomes available, that moment simply wasn't this summer. Rather than damage a strong institutional relationship with Bayern by pushing harder, Madrid used the links to Olise almost as cover while they worked the phones on Diomande behind the scenes. Then there's Alvarez. And this one is more interesting than people realise. Madrid's club record offer of €150 million for the Argentine wasn't rejected because Atletico simply said no for the sake of it. Atletico turned it down outright, pointing to his release clause, and made it clear they had zero intention of strengthening a direct rival mid-window. But even if that bid had somehow gone through, Alvarez was never a true positional match for what Madrid actually needed. He's a central second striker profile, brilliant at Atletico, brilliant for Argentina, but not the explosive one-on-one wide forward that Jose Mourinho was specifically asking for. Multiple reports out of Spain now suggest the Alvarez approach functioned as much as a statement of intent and a disruption of their domestic rivals as it did a genuine transfer pursuit. It generated headlines, it kept Atletico and Barcelona on their toes, but it was never really the priority signing. Which brings us to the man who actually got the deal. And to understand why Madrid moved so aggressively for Diomande, you have to understand just how absurd his rise has actually been. 2 years ago, he was at DME Academy in Florida. In January 2025, he signed for Leganes, initially featuring for their reserve side. 6 months later, Leipzig took a chance on him. And in a single Bundesliga season, he didn't just play well, he became one of the most dangerous attackers in Germany. No player in the entire Bundesliga completed more dribbles than his 118. No player in any position won more individual duels than his 437. Then he took that form to the World Cup, created 11 chances in just 4 appearances for Ivory Coast, and turned himself from a name scouts were quietly tracking into one every super club in Europe wanted urgently. And that's really where this transfer battle starts to get its edge, because for most of the summer, Real Madrid weren't even the front runners. PSG were. Diomande had reportedly agreed personal terms with the French champions all the way back in June, and by most accounts he was leaning toward Paris over everyone else, including Liverpool, who'd had an initial bid of around £69 million turned down early in the window. Liverpool actually moved on before Madrid even entered the picture, quietly shifting their attention toward PSG's own Bradley Barcola as their new priority target, with reports suggesting Liverpool see missing out on Diomande as something they can live with, given how well Barcola's profile fits into Andoni Iraola's system.
Well, you've asked for it and we've finally delivered. Relive the glory days with the most iconic designs in football history. Whether you're a fan of classic club colours or legendary international strips, we've got something to ignite your nostalgia. Perfect for match days, casual wear or adding to your collection. Shop the new retro range now at goal90.shop. Massive discounts await.
So if PSG had the head start, personal terms locked in since June, why didn't they get it done? This is the part that genuinely surprised people. PSG simply refused to enter a bidding war. When Real Madrid came in late with serious intent, PSG had a final bid worth around £102.5 million rejected by Leipzig. And rather than go again, the club released a statement that was almost pointed in its tone, saying the transfer fee and salary demands were completely disproportionate and distortive, and that PSG will not break its principles of rational financial management and squad balance. They even took a swipe at what they called the inflationary and manipulative games of certain player agents. Whatever was happening behind the scenes with Diomande's representation, and there were reports of real confusion around his agency complicating matters, it was enough to make PSG walk away entirely, even after having a full month's head start. Real Madrid, on the other hand, did the opposite of hesitate. Sources close to the club say key negotiators had actually been scouting Diomande for around 5 years, long before his breakout season, which tells you this wasn't a reactive panic buy off the back of one good World Cup. Mourinho personally pushed for him, an opening bid was rejected by Leipzig, and rather than sulk about it, Madrid's negotiators physically flew to Germany, sat face to face with Leipzig executives, and pushed a revised offer that eventually crossed the €100 million threshold, reportedly rising with variables to somewhere between 115 and 135 million euros. Just as importantly, they got personal terms agreed with the player himself, reportedly modelled on Jude Bellingham's contract, structured to reward and incentivize year-on-year improvement, rather than just hand him a flat wage. For a 19-year-old who's barely scratched the surface of his ceiling, that kind of forward-looking structure was clearly persuasive. So why Madrid over PSG when Yan had originally leaned toward Paris? Part of it looks like simple leverage and timing, PSG stalling long enough for Real to swoop in with genuine conviction and a completed personal terms agreement, while PSG was still trying to re-enter negotiations in the final hours. But part of it is also the pitch itself. Real Madrid under Mourinho in a rebuilt 4-2-3-1 offered Diomande a clear runway to first-team football immediately, alongside a front line that already includes Kylian Mbappe and Jude Bellingham, rather than fighting for a starting spot in a PSG squad that's just won back-to-back Champions Leagues and already has serious depth out wide. Now, where does he actually fit? If Vinicius stays, Diomande likely starts on the right, which sets up a genuinely exciting dynamic with Trent Alexander-Arnold overlapping from right back. If Vinicius doesn't stay, the left is his instead. Either way, somebody's Bernabéu spot just got a lot less secure. Rodrigo is the name under the most pressure, still working his way back from an ACL tear and already at risk of losing his place in the pecking order, with his contract running only to 2028 and Madrid reportedly open to offers. Brahim Diaz and Franco Mastantuono may also find themselves pushed further down the list. And that takes us to the Vinicius situation, because this transfer doesn't exist in isolation from it. Madrid have already told Arsenal, who see him as one of their top targets for the attack, that they won't even sit down to negotiate for anything under 160 million euros. Diomande's arrival doesn't have to mean Vinicius is pushed out the door. In fact, the latest word from within the club is that Vinicius is now prioritizing a renewal at the Bernabéu. But there's no question Diomande gives Madrid serious leverage in those contract talks, a very real, very talented reminder to Vinicius of exactly what happens if he decides to play hardball. So when you put it all together, this wasn't really Madrid settling for their third choice. Olise was never available. Alvarez was never the right shape. Diomande was the one negotiators had been watching for 5 years, the one Mourinho specifically asked for, and the one who said yes when it mattered. Now the only question left is whether he can live up to the hype, and whether it's Rodrigo or eventually Vinicius who ends up paying the price for it. What do you think of the deal? Let us know in the comments. Remember to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel. Also be sure to turn on post notifications so that you don't miss out on any new videos. See you next time. Bye.